So, Paul, we have some exciting news.
Well, indeed. We have been informed that Christiana and Tom's brilliant book, The Future We Choose, has made it to the final round of the Goodreads Best Books of 2020. And this is an award decided by readers.
Oh, okay.
So the book, yeah, exactly. So, you know where we're coming from.
Yeah.
So the book now needs your vote. How do we do it?
Okay, so we're inviting our listeners to vote for The Future We Choose at goodreads.com/choice awards. Then click on the science and technology category, and that's where you'll find The Future We Choose. Vote for the book there. The link is in the show notes. I got you.
Great. Thank you. And now on with the show.
And welcome to Outrage+Optimism. I'm Tom Riffitt-Karnak.
I'm Christiana Figueres.
And I'm Paul Dickinson.
This week we discuss Paul's dream.
Yes, we do. My dream is like all the corporations in the world get together and kind of adopt the responsibilities of government, and the investors do it as well, and it's fantastic, and it all comes together and they deliver the SDGs and we all live happily ever after.
Plus we speak to Sanda Ojiambo, the CEO of the UN Global Compact, and we have music from Gaia. Thanks for being here. So one of the great things about this podcast is that I get to sit and chat with both of you each week, and we get a chance to think about what we want to talk about. What are the biggest issues of the week? But one of the bad things about the Death Star that is the US election is now, in the aftermath of it, it feels like we've entered this period of calm, which is wonderful. But I don't think we've had a chance to think about what we're going to talk about on the podcast this week. So what do you guys want to talk about?
Well, I mean, just thinking about that period of calm after 4 intolerable years, what about like just 10 minutes of just silence where we all kind of, zone in to the fact that we have a new president coming in and the world's going in the right direction? Just an idea.
That is a good idea. Or relaxing and uplifting music. Christiane doesn't need that, of course, because she lives at the beach and she just looks at the ocean.
Well, I actually have a Costa Rica announcement for you.
Costa Rica.
We haven't talked about Costa Rica in a while.
Go for it.
We haven't talked about Costa Rica in a while. So
if you get sponsorship from the Costa Rican Department of Tourism, you do know you have to declare that, don't you, in this podcast?
And share the money and the holidays and the fruit.
Yes. Well, we haven't quite got there yet.
Okay.
Because actually, what I want to share with you all is actually quite disappointing news in Costa Rica.
Oh, surprising.
So, like many other countries, especially developing countries, we're in a serious deficit situation here, caused, among other things, by COVID, just that COVID caught us, I would say, particularly unprepared for a crisis like that. And sadly, very sadly, there are some voices that are beginning to suggest that the way to bring fast and easy income to the government is oil and gas exploration.
Ooh. Oil and gas exploration.
How do you put that idea together with the fact that we are globally decreasing our demand of oil and increasingly also going into a lower demand for gas, but certainly for oil with all our electrification that we've been talking about in the podcast in some of these episodes. But also, how do you bring that together with the image of Costa Rica, with who Costa Rica has been for decades? All our, green tourism, our biodiversity destination. How on earth do you bring those two things together? So
is this government policy now in Costa Rica, or is it?
No.
Okay.
It's not government policy. No, what we currently have is we have a law that establishes a moratorium on oil and gas exploration. Okay. But that's just a moratorium that can be turned over. And there were quite a few of us that were actually advocating for a law that prohibits oil and gas exploration. And in the middle of this comes this brilliant idea on the part of some that we should have fast and easy income by drilling here for oil and gas. So it's just, honestly, I feel like it's a dagger in my heart, right? And it's a dagger in the heart of the country, not just mine. So here I am, having promised that I would keep a very, very low profile in my home country for many different reasons, having now to
if this is going to be Cristiano Figueres' declaration of a run for the presidency in Costa Rica, I think we're going to have a drum roll before you. Oh, it's not. Okay, sorry. Right.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
definitely
it is.
No.
Like in a pantomime.
No,
oh, yes, it is.
No. But it is a declaration that I will be joining a campaign against these voices that are calling for oil and gas exploration. Anyway, that's just to balance out how many times have I been on this podcast singing the praises of Costa Rica. So just so that you know that we have optimism, but we also have outrage in Costa Rica. There you are.
What about Costa Rica becoming a country that's a kind of museum of industries? So you build this oil and gas, you link it up with like typewriter manufacturing, films, photocopiers. There's a whole bunch of technologies. Exactly. It could be kind of like go back to the 20th century in Costa Rica, enjoy nature and things that people don't do anymore.
That's a brilliant suggestion. I think I will make that the cornerstone of our campaign.
Costa Rica, the museum of things people don't do anymore. I mean, I reckon that they might come up with something better than that. You know what, though? It's funny you should mention how that's going in Costa Rica, because I don't know if you've heard, but Paul and I are from the UK, and actually something quite impressive happened in the UK. It's very rare that we get to say something which positions the UK environmentally above Costa Rica, so we need to enjoy this.
No. Is this the moment when I should turn off? I'm turning my recording off.
Gracious Queen.
So
yes.
one of the things that happened this week is Boris Johnson came out with his 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution. And interestingly, I mean, one of the places where I get some of my news from is Business Green, which I think is a brilliant outlet. James Murray is a great writer. And he said that it's the first time, in his estimation, that a world leader has not just talked about the desire to bring down the curtain on the fossil fuel age within 3 decades, but it has explained in real detail how he intends to do it. The 10-point plan includes things like ending sales of the internal combustion engine by 2030, creating 250,000 jobs in green energy. It's really quite impressive. And, critics have looked at it and said it includes pledges for new funding, a significant proportion of which, of course, is repackaged from previous commitments, but there is some new money there. But I think what's interesting is it demonstrates, I mean, I don't know what you guys took from it, but what I took from it is that with the best will in the world, the current Prime Minister of the UK is a political opportunist, right? He does what he needs to do in order to get the political momentum of the moment. And I think that it's no accident that this comes out now, with new Biden administration coming in, realization that climate change is the way that he builds bridges with the world, with which he has in large part burnt bridges, if you think about Brexit and some of the relationships he's had with Trump. But he sees climate change as a way back to establish good relationships with others and how the UK can burnish its credentials as a global leader in the 21st century. And that's great, right? If those things start to align.
And as the host of COP26, not that we should forget that.
But if those things start to align, if the national political interest and reducing emissions and creating a resilient world align politically, I'll take that. That's good news.
That's exactly the way it should be.
Yeah.
It was reported, he had a famous fallout with his principal kind of advisor, Dominic Cummings. And there was a suggestion, and this is all kind of hearsay, so you can't take it to court, but there was a suggestion that Cummings was predicting that this would not play so well with certain people in certain districts of the UK that, may not feel themselves to be part of this kind of decarbonization revolution. Cummings was actually the architect of Brexit, which actually I think, who knows if the UK will come to regret. So there is a bit of a question about the narrative and how we can make sure together that the narrative of jobs and opportunity manifests itself in real industries where people feel, in their pockets richer as a result of this decarbonization. I know it can be done, but it's got to have the right story behind it.
But your mention there of story is interesting. So, I mean, it's no secret that I and probably Paul and certainly Christiana were not fans of Brexit. But one of the moment when I thought that Brexit were going to win was I saw Nigel Farage on TV like 2 months before the Brexit vote, and he was being questioned by someone, and they said, "Oh, but Brexit is going to be bad for the economy, and what about this?" And he said, "Who cares about that? This is about identity. This is about our story as a country." And I thought, oh my God, he's going to win. Because actually that's more powerful than appealing to people and trying to frighten them. I'm not saying that the Remain campaign was all about frightening. There's some very good arguments behind it, as we're now realizing. But actually that need for a new story which, Paul, I think you've thought about this, that Ben Rhodes talked about, is arguably behind what's in this Boris Johnson 10-point plan.
Yeah, I mean, just to remind people about this incredible interview we had with Ben Rhodes, where he said the USA needs a mission. And actually decarbonizing and responding to climate change could be that mission. And I think that notion that we need a kind of national purpose that we can articulate and feel proud about, have identity around, does have some meaning. But neither you or I, Tom, have ever been in politics, whereas Christiana, you spent all your life with politicians. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we need stories are very powerful, and for people it's much easier to understand and certainly to remember a story than to remember facts, hard data. But here's a story that is fundamented in facts. So I don't know if you two know, but when I lived in London, I used to follow a Twitter account that is called MyGridGB. And they publish every so often what the grid of Britain is actually looking like.
The grid as in the power grid, like what's the mix of power creation?
The power grid, yeah. What fuels are producing electricity in Britain. And so I just looked it up as you were talking. And so here's the story that just went up 10 minutes ago on MyGridGB. Highly recommended for you to follow this. It says, there have been approximately 4,883 hours, approximately, right? 4,883
minute
hours.
Here, minute there.
Yeah, a minute here, a minute there, of coal-free British electricity so far in 2020. Coal has provided just 2.1% of British electricity over the last 12 months.
Wow.
I mean, if there is a story of a country that has decarbonized, certainly away from coal, but now from Boris Johnson hearing the beginning of the story of the next chapter, away from oil. That is, I mean, it's fantastic. It's fantastic to see that we are at that point in which that national interest and the strength of the economy really is being fundamentally understood to be fully aligned with the global need and with climate science. Because as long as we've talked about this ad nauseum on the podcast, as long as those two are seen to be competing with each other, I think we know which would win. But the fact that it is being increasingly understood that those two actually are aligned and are mutually reinforcing is just so refreshing. And I think we'll be seeing many of these stories and many of these coming certainly from the United States, but increasingly from other countries. I think 2020 is going to be the turning point for this, of understanding that that addressing climate change continues to be a responsibility, but we're moving from the burden to the opportunity.
Well, let me throw in a fact, maybe a big fact, actually, that kind of supports everything you just said, Christiana. I mean, like anyone who's worked in climate change for a while will have looked at that graph of where energy comes from, you know, British thermal units or BTUs or whatever they're called, and you can normalize them against everything: nuclear, renewables, coal, oil, and gas. And certainly when I used to look at that in my first, last 10 years or whatever, you'd see these giant sections, coal, oil, and gas. They were huge. And then just a few slithers for nuclear and renewables. Now, get this. The International Energy Agency, whose job is to know about this, have just announced that solar and wind capacity will overtake gas capacity by 2023, which nearly anyone in business will tell you is basically tomorrow. So that's the message to those Costa Rican policymakers, I'm afraid, Christiana, if you're going to leave it to them and not take over the country yourself, which is our recommendation, that really, fundamentally, the mathematics is changing at a deep level. Renewables are accelerating. And it was Nigel, our dear friend, Nigel Topping, who says, if something's kind of very small, but it's doubling every year, look out.
Well, and I think it's also the IEA who has put a new spin on the term King Coal, right? They're now talking about solar as being the king of power. Very interesting turn of events there.
It reminds me of that old quote about how you go bankrupt, right? Which is the joke, which is that you go bankrupt first very slowly and then very fast. And actually, for a long time, sort of solar and wind and renewables seemed to be kind of nowhere, right? They were bumping along the bottom. I mean, my family all works in oil and gas. You know, it was always a bit of a joke about the fact that it wasn't really anywhere. Then all of a sudden, boom, it's everywhere, and actually will become the predominant energy source in the world in just a few years. Amazing progress. Now, one person who actually has a very important role in this is Sanda Ojiambo, who is the Executive Director and CEO of the United Nations Global Compact. Are we ready to pivot to the interview?
Well, yes, because, I mean, Christiana may have something else she wants to say, but I just want to say that I think that the Global Compact is this fantastic organization, all these corporations all kind of together under the auspices of the United Nations. And it's kind of like, I feel like I kind of sort of woke up from this brilliant dream and there was the Global Compact. There it was.
So as far as I know, Paul Dickinson's wet dream has always been a kind of united corporations to go along with the United Nations.
That's exactly
and the Global Compact is basically it. It exists.
Sorry, yes. Very excited.
Okay, so very exciting.
Sanda,
so do you want to introduce what the Global Compact is before I introduce Sanda?
Well, I would say it is an extraordinary initiative that brings together 10,000 corporations now to focus their energies on delivering the Sustainable Development Goals. And
From
and
how many
taking
countries?
Quiz.
All of them, I'm guessing.
160, not bad. Okay,
Well,
sorry, carry on.
How many country networks?
Yeah,
We're
how many
quizzing him
country
now.
networks?
Just people who are listening, Tom's got like a piece of information in front of him, and I'm doing this from sort of memory and from my heart.
How many universal principles would you say that they promote?
All of them. All of the universal principles, all the important ones.
The answer is 10, Paul. They promote 10 universal principles.
10 important universal principles.
Sorry, carry on.
Well, suffice to say that the promise they have is to be able to sort of bring the dignity of the nation state to the corporation, to allow corporations to sort of, as it were, stand shoulder to shoulder and together do the work of bringing our society forward to where it needs to go, dealing with the economic and the social system conditions and all the SDGs. And I just think it's a fantastic way for us to kind of reinvent our 21st century whilst it's still only a fifth old.
So, Paul, here's the next quiz question. Which is actually the largest voluntary corporate sustainability initiative in the world?
That's what I was going to ask.
I'm going to go for the UN Global Compact.
Wow.
You
look at
got
that.
it.
Although there are some other interesting collaborations like
Are there?
CDP. But no, absolutely, the UN Global Compact is a fantastic.
So anyway, moving on to the introduction
Tom,
of Sanda.
if you'd like to complete the process.
So, Paul, thank you for that generous and thoughtful introduction to the Global Compact. Now, Sanda herself, the Executive Director and CEO of the United Nations Global Compact, is the second woman to be appointed.
Wait. Who has just arrived in New York like a week ago?
Yeah, totally. Appointed in June 2020, of course.
But had to work out of Kenya and has just arrived in New York, probably still living out of boxes.
Attentive listeners will realize that was during the first lockdown. Absolutely, only just arrived. The first African citizen to be appointed to the post. Herself, since 2010, she serves as the head of sustainable business and social impact at African telecoms company Safaricom in Kenya and was the senior manager of Safaricom before that. Before she made her transition to corporate sustainability, she worked for NGOs across Africa addressing the issues of inequality and discrimination. She is, as you are about to hear, a remarkable and inspiring and thoughtful leader. And personally, I feel, and I expect my co-host would agree, that she is going to have an enormous impact at the UN Global Compact. So here we go. Here's Sanda, and we will be back afterwards with more thoughts and analysis.
Sanda, how wonderful to have you. Welcome to Outrage and Optimism. Sanda, you know, some of our listeners may not even have a clue of what the Global Compact is. So I would love for you to explain a little bit about the Global Compact. But I just wanted to give it a little bit of a context because, first of all, you took the job, and I really want to know why did you take the job. But then you weren't able to move to New York, and you had to stay at home in Kenya and sort of remotely control an entire organization in New York that I presume you had actually never met. How was it to start a completely new job via Zoom, I presume, or at least via remote control?
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on here, Paul, Tom, and Christiana. Just really great to be here and have this conversation. When you ask about why I took this job, so, my first instinct was to say it was a persistent headhunter, but let me not give him all the credit.
Well, there you go. There's truth for you.
There are some very well-paid persistent headhunters, but, I was also at a point of reflection in my life. I tend to do this thing around my career where every 5 years I sort of ask myself, it's been 5 years, what does the next 5 look like?
What's
or is
next?
it time to ship out?
Yeah.
Or, shape up and ship out. So I do this renewal every 5 years. But, 12 years ago, I broke that 5-year rule.
It's a very healthy behavior. May I congratulate you for that behavior? It's very healthy.
It's not very traditional inside the UN, if I can venture that.
Well, I'm yet to find out.
Okay.
But I broke this rule because 12 years ago, I joined a fantastic organization in Kenya that really had at its heart what I think the Global Compact does, which is using business to transform society.
Yeah.
So I come from a previous role in the telco sector where I drove sustainability. How do businesses look at sustainability? How do businesses impact more than simply their customers with that transactional sale? So, 12 years hit. And I was like, I've missed 5 years. I missed 5. I missed 5 plus 5. And I'm on to, 2. And great time for reflection. And so it just coincided with a job vacancy, a headhunter, and my reflection moment. And I'll be very honest. That was it. This was one of those things where I think the ducks were lined up, the stars were aligned. And
the universe was calling.
The universe was calling, and I kicked off actually probably about a 7-month conversation on a recruitment process around joining the UN Global Compact. So that's why I'm here.
Did you know much about the Compact before you joined?
Yeah.
Were you very familiar with the Global Compact?
Actually, I was, because, part of those 12 years that I talk about, 10 of the 12, I had led the portfolio in a company that was one of the UN Global Compact members. So to be very honest, I knew this organization, but I knew it from the outside. So I knew what it stood for. I knew what it was trying to achieve. I love it that I knew probably about a third of the team even before I joined. I got to know how aggressive and how big they are and follow through from the outside even before I knew them. But so I knew the organization. I knew what it stood for. I knew its positioning. Every year for the last 7 or so years, I would come to New York for the General Assembly Week. That's a big week when, people come together to really review progress on some of the UN big goals.
Right.
And so it wasn't an alien organization to me, but I had seen it from the outside. And now I was going to be deep in the inside and leading it.
Now, that tells me, Sanda, that therefore Safaricom would have been one of the active members of Global Compact. The Global Compact has almost 12,000 companies. I would venture to say that they're not all active in the Global Compact. And how delightful that Safaricom was via you, and therefore you got to know the Global Compact and the all-female team that was running it. Now that you are there, because I think you're finally in New York, now that you are there, what have you found that surprises you in the sense of, this ain't good enough. This really has to change under my leadership. What is your vision for transformation?
Yeah, great. And as you do acknowledge, where I worked before, Safaricom was one of the active members, and that's true. And it really, we weren't perfect. I think we were doing well, as an African company. Now that I'm here, but, Christiana, you say, now that I'm here, I'm here in a very strange time. I'm sitting in my office today. I
hadn't noticed that.
You didn't think so?
No. No idea what you're talking about.
So I'm sitting in my office here, and it's Thursday, right? It's Thursday. I think there's 4 colleagues in the office. I come in, 1 or 2 days a week. I moved to New York about 5 weeks ago, and so it's very hard to speak about what is and what what the status quo is, because I don't know when I'll get that chance to be with my team fully, to see what the vibe is, to see this, it's a lovely office, but I think it holds about 100 people. I don't know when I'll see these 100 people together. I got the chance to meet them on Zoom. I think we meet every 2 weeks on Zoom. And the energy comes through, but there's so many things that you miss. You miss empathy, you miss connection.
Sure.
You probably don't joke the way that you would. We don't have around the coffee machine banter. You can't just tap someone and say, hey, let's go out for lunch and quickly brainstorm an idea. So certainly there's a lot of dynamics that are missing. I get that you can do a lot online and virtually, but I miss that. So that's a unique challenge. But certainly joining, and I mean, you mentioned one of those, which is great. We have a very large membership. My question is first, are we giving suitable and equal value to that entire membership? Because that's, I think, what would spur levels of activity and engagement in the work that we do. So my first question is, now that we have this membership of close to 14,000, there's 11,000 businesses and 3,000 non-businesses. What are we doing with them? What's our level of engagement? What's the value creation that we have for them? And what value do they get from us? Is a question that I really do want to interrogate really well. As so happens with the role, I mean, I come at a time when I need to develop the new strategy going forward. So we are working on that right now to just clarify what the Global Compact will be for our next chapter going forward. And I think that's a great opportunity to address what we feel could work better, to also, actually, because everything has just been so unprecedented this year, maybe it's time to just make unprecedented changes and see what the Global Compact can do.
There you go.
Going forward.
I like that.
Everything is possible.
Everything is possible. Okay, Sanda. So I've been watching these tough news programs. So I'm going to hit you with the really tough questions. I mean, just to give you a little bit of background, I did write a book called Beautiful Corporations. So you've got to figure out yourself. You kind of know where I'm coming from here. So
Right.
I put it to you that all leading businesses should join the Global Compact. Will you agree?
I would. Could you help me?
Okay, there
Could
you
you
go.
could you help me get them all on board, please?
That's the Dickinson line of tough questioning.
That's the tough question.
I'm going to follow up, though. I got to follow up because I think I've got you on the ropes here a little bit.
Yeah.
Would you agree that all leading companies that manage to successfully join the Global Compact should be active in the Global Compact?
They must.
There you go.
must be active.
So, I mean, in all seriousness, I really admire your organization. I'm fascinated and excited by the idea that business can evolve from its kind of historically it's been, sort of without a kind of purpose above and beyond its product or service. Can I ask you, how do you see business sort of in society over the next 10 years, even over the next 100 years?
Yeah, so I believe in this concept called the 3 Ps. Actually, there's probably 4 Ps. So let me, over time, I think has evolved on this 4 Ps. So you first have to be clear on your purpose.
Okay.
Yeah, so business purpose is central. Then you've got to be able to define the principles by which you're going to execute or live through your purpose. Because purpose runs the risk of being very sort of esoteric and up there, but you can ground it in principles in ways that you're going to be. Then you need to have people who are really aligned to what that purpose and principle is going to be. And I firmly believe that thereafter the profit will follow. But I think it's going to be in that order. If you put in any other configuration, in my view, and this is my business theory, it doesn't work out to the end that you want. I firmly believe that purpose and profit can and should coexist, but you've got to be able to look at putting your purpose first and understanding what it is that you're here to do.
And can I ask a tiny follow-on question? I mean, in your previous work at a very successful company doing fascinating things with the dematerialization of growth and financial services and telecoms, I mean, it's just an amazing story. But how did you find, what was your experience of identifying purpose within that company, and how did it manifest? Just because we've got, thousands of listeners who work in businesses, and if they want to find their own relationship to purpose, what's the route?
Yeah, so, I'd love to take full credit for this, but allow me to just recognize my former CEO and leader, who was a fantastic guy, Bob Collymore. Bob he was just an amazing and astute, purpose-led man, most authentic guy that I know. So, first of all, I worked in telco. Telco is not one of the most loved industries around the world for a number of reasons. But, Bob joined Safaricom and challenged us because he said, look, beyond data, SMS, and voice, what are you selling? What are you selling to customers? And once they're connected to you, then what? You've got to have value that is bigger than the transactional exchange that you're going to offer your customers. Otherwise, one day they're with you, one day they're it's kind of like serial dating, They'll be with you, they'll be with someone else, they'll be with someone else because they're not getting... No loyalty, no value. At some point, everyone prices out the same, right? So Bob's challenge to us was to really think about the transformation that as a business we wanted to cause for society. And so in my former organization, when you walked into the office, you never saw anything that would indicate we're telco. We never spoke data. You wouldn't see a signage about pricing or a bundle or anything. What you would see was our purpose, which was transforming lives. You would see indications around our sustainability goals. And you'd see a team that was looking at telco to the extent that telco could influence agriculture, could influence health, could influence education. A team that was looking at how we could have cleaner, greener operations in-house. A team that was committed to fighting corruption as best as it could within the organization and its ecosystem. A team that engaged its supply chain in sharing the same principles across the board. And so that's the environment in which I work. That's the environment that made us a great partnership with the UN Global Compact. And that's really what, our view then was. And, things like financial inclusion then become second nature because you're not going to have a customer if the lady that you're serving just is not able to, access some form of financial inclusion. She definitely will not have the paperwork to walk into a bank like you and I would. She definitely won't have an ATM card or a cash point card. But if she can save her money on her mobile phone and do a transaction, that's empowering, that's inclusive. And those are the kind of very micro changes that I think businesses need to look at. And, that's what I say, purpose, principles, get it going, and the profits will come. I mean, admittedly, so I don't know if I told you, but I come from Kenya. I worked in Nairobi, Kenya. And, obviously the socioeconomic environment and therefore the opportunities are immense. For me, I look at my continent of one filled with opportunity. A lot of people see it as one filled with, risk. I see opportunity at every corner because there's enough problems, enough challenges to create fantastic, innovative solutions. And I think that's what my former company, Safaricom, did.
That's such a beautiful vision of purpose as the driving force behind business and profit as an outcome of that. But let me just sort of go back to, because in a funny way, if you look at the history, the existence of the Global Compact wasn't always assured, right? I mean, back to the founding of the UN, the world's nations coming together to solve big problems. The famous quote at the beginning that it wasn't to deliver us to heaven, but to save us from hell. And then as time's gone on, the UN, the collective will of the world's governments, largely democratic, but not exclusively, has kind of come together to deliver these big outcomes. I mean, as far as humanity goes, if we have a purpose statement, probably the closest thing is some combination of the Paris Agreement and the SDGs, right, in terms of what we're trying to do beyond profit. And the Global Compact sort of exists to help deliver that purpose. But is it's a slightly unfair way of phrasing it, but I'm very curious to know your response. Does it Does
Here
it
we
exist?
go. Oh, no.
Does it exist because the UN has failed?
Tom,
Sanda,
Sanda, I just want you to know that Tom no longer has a UN passport, neither do I. But if he did, he would have just lost it right now.
So does it...
At that point in time.
Has it had to come in because the UN hasn't been able to deliver on its promise?
And by the way, Tom, if you say you don't believe in fairies, one of them dies. But Sanda, you have the question.
Over to you.
Did you even hear the question?
I think I'm in a deep enough hole to now pass over to you to respond.
Right now, dig yourself out.
I'm hoping you're going to do that.
Here goes.
Yeah.
Look, it's as with all organizations, I believe the UN is on a continuous process of evolution. Look, the UN, we recently celebrated 75 years. The Global Compact recently turned 20. Now, this is my view. I think that at the time that we were founded in the year 2000, there was a clear recognition that business had to come to the table. Business had to come to the party. So I think we came in at the right time, right place, with the right vision. I mean, then the purpose was clear. And I think the overall acceptance of the role that business can and should play in what the UN is trying to achieve is much clearer and was much clearer defined by the forming of the Global Compact. Yeah. When Kofi Annan founded it, what he said was he wanted to put a human face to this global market. And I do think, timing was right, positioning was right, and 20 years on, here we are.
Well, you have quite a machine there, quite a network, an enormous sort of potential. But no, just before the final question that Christiana will ask, I mean, I'm still intrigued by just trying to get a little bit more from you about how you think. Just go to 2050. That's a horizon that a lot of people are looking at now. I mean, do you think business will be collaborating more with each other? Do you see closer relationships with shareholders? Do you see citizens getting more conscious in the way they purchase or invest? How do you see business evolving? We talked about the UN evolving. How should business evolve?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of key things that will likely happen. And I want to say I think COVID has provided a great time for pause and reflection in terms of that. I think one of the most interesting things is, trust surveys show a slight decline in business and business leadership, but also just an increase in enlightened consumerism. And, that's pretty much been a focus, I believe, of the global north. But I'm beginning to see a lot more enlightened consumerism even in the global south. Yeah. So I think the first thing I'm going to say that will change is I think that customers and consumers will have a continued but much bigger voice in shaping the longevity and the perceptions of business. I just don't think that businesses can go around, at some point in time, willy-nilly doing what they please. There's a lot that puts business right now, I think, front and center of what consumers and customers will say. That's one. Secondly is that I don't think that in the long term, businesses are going to take things such as supply chain sustainability lightly anymore. I think we have seen so much challenge over the last 8 months in terms of what it means to have a broken, a fragile supply chain. You could sit in a headquarters somewhere in, I don't know, somewhere, let me talk about Montreal. It's where I went to uni, and I had a great conversation 10 minutes ago about Montreal. So you could be sitting in Montreal and wondering and not actually knowing who your supplier is, round the other end of the globe. But when a crisis hits you like now and you can't get a very small input for what you need, you will know who your supplier is. Yeah. The question is, what could you have done better or different to protect your supplier or to support your supplier to be able to better weather all the adversity that comes through? I recall when I was back home, we were able to pivot a lot of the manufacturing lines and produce hand sanitizer. But, if you're going to put it in a bottle and put on a pump, I think that pump component had to be imported. So we had lots of bottles of sanitizer, but no pumps. And I think that's what it means to understand the fragility of a supply chain. Yeah, because at some point the response just slowed because we couldn't get, so there's a lot of shifting and lots of innovation therefore happened, but it shows you fragility in terms of stuff. So I think number one. The second thing for me is that people are going to be more conscious about where the supply chains lie and how to create sustainability around that. The third is, I think, because we've seen so much devastation and challenge, I'd hope that businesses are very aware that one, we will not thrive unless social justice is addressed. And for me, social justice is, we cannot go on in a world that is becoming increasingly unequal all the time. Yeah. And for me, the social injustices for me are gender. There's a statistic that it'll take 267 years to close this gender gap. Yeah. I mean, who's going to be here in 267 years? But look, if any of you have a daughter, what can we promise them?
Not 200 and something years, for sure not.
In this generation. No, there's nothing you can promise them. The second is, I think we've got to take a look at climate. I come from a country with a fantastic ecosystem, wildlife all around and everything. And, but you look at the decimation that's happening, you look at the ongoing, famine, flood, destruction cycle. There's big issues there. So for me, that's those. So for me, it's enlightened consumerism, looking at supply chain sustainability, and look at the fragilities that actually threaten all of us. And I just make it very practical by saying, look, what are we going to leave for our next generation? And businesses actually lie at the root of solutions for all of all of those elements.
Well, three very, very important points, Sanda. And in the context of those 3 points, we usually ask our guests at the end where you lie in the spectrum between outrage and optimism, because we think we need both. So I'm assuming that you are starting a job with a lot of optimism, but would love to hear you. How do you express that? But also, what are you outraged about that we haven't done yet?
Who's we?
Good question.
Good question.
We the global society. We the global society.
We the global society, it just needs to be clear. So I am outraged that we have allowed ourselves to live in such unequal times. That for me is it. I think the gap between the haves and the have-nots just continues to increase exponentially. And I think that we, being governments, policymakers, businesses, just need to look at a more inclusive model for which businesses and society can coexist and thrive. Yep. You can't live in two worlds in one city. It's not possible. It's not possible. And so for me, I'm outraged that inequalities continue to rise and exist. And some of those inequalities then play out in issues again, like climate and gender, that are just, two really areas where I just put primacy in terms of urgency and things that we need to really take on very seriously, the collective we, so government, policy, business, civil society, and all of us together. Those are some of the things that outrage me.
And your optimism?
Well, look, I'm optimistic that everything will get back to what is. It's a very, it's an odd time to be in a city that has been ravaged but is recovering from the COVID pandemic. I'm optimistic that we will find solutions that will allow us to be where we were, get back on the path to recovery. And certainly if I look specifically at my organization, I'm just optimistic that we will be able to, through our new chapter, new strategy, provide solutions that make practical sense for business. Because we've all had collectively a moment to pause as business.
Definitely.
And I think now more than ever, we've had the chance to really understand what the role of business has been. Because either business has been decimated by the pandemic or business has thrived through the pandemic.
Absolutely.
And let's take the lessons learned from both and chart a way forward.
Yeah. Which kinds of businesses with which conditions have actually thrived? Sanda, thank you very much. And you used the word pause. I just remember that at the beginning of this year, we used to think that history would look back at 2020 and recognize it as the great pause. And now, as we come to the end of the year, I think we're revising our view of future history and saying history will look back at 2020 as the year of the great reset. Because that's what we have to do. We have to reset our mind, reset the economy, reset gender relations, et cetera. It's certainly a reset, environmental management in all its aspects. So here's to a great reset. Reset New York.
Absolutely.
Because we're talking about
that.
It all. Sanda, thank you so much. Really appreciate your taking the time. And welcome to New York. Welcome to the UN. Welcome to the Global Compact. I hope you're hanging on to your UN passport because Tom has lost his.
I like how much you distance yourself from me in this conversation.
Great. Thank you for having me all. It's been an amazing conversation.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So what a privilege to have a chance to sit down with Sanda. So insightful to get that sense of what she's thinking, coming into that new role. Paul, what do you leave that conversation with?
Well, I love the way that she was so bluff and clear and honest and direct about seeing this opportunity, taking it, and her belief in the UN Global Compact and its potential. And I do think that comes a lot from the brilliant work she did in her previous company and her ability to see the role a company can play in transforming a whole sort of sector. I mean, that company giving so many people banking facilities through their phones. It's just an extraordinary leapfrog in the capability. And I think that she wants to bring out, draw out, that's what educate means, I guess, in a way, to draw out from thousands of companies, all that they can do to improve the quality of people's lives, which is really the heart of, I think, the kind of mission of the modern corporation.
Christiana?
Well, I'm excited about two things there. I am excited that she brings both a corporate approach to this, because honestly, that has to be done. So I think of the Global Compact as bringing business rigor and discipline to the UN rather than the other way around. So
Wow.
I'm very confident that she will be doing this. I'm also incredibly excited that she brings her African knowledge to this, right? Because, let's be very upfront here. If there's one continent that somehow always seems to be at the end of any list, it's Africa. And the fact that she is going to make sure that Africa is at the front of the list, I think is very exciting and about time.
No, totally. And I mean, I think the other thing which I took away from that is, I mean, as we know, Christiana, you can achieve so much at the UN, right? The UN is such an important institution in the world right now, but it's also to some degree kind of dehumanizing, because it's all about this system and this process that everybody has to sort of fit into. And what I was really impressed in her, both in the conversation we had on air and also the discussion prior and after, was she's really focusing on the human elements of this. And I think she's really seeing that those human connections are where she can make progress. And the Global Compact, I mean, I've always had huge respect for the Global Compact, but it's a difficult job, right? Because you're sitting at that intersection of a very bureaucratic system and a very fast-moving private sector. And I feel hugely optimistic that she'll be really effective in that role.
And I'm just going to throw in a quick word for sort of technology. Now, there are smaller companies and medium-sized companies that are part of the Global Compact, and they've all got their role, but there are enormous companies that are also part of it. And, these really big global companies are probably some of the first organizations in the world with the kind of information systems that they can really understand the world as an integrated unit. I've spoken to many people working in huge companies who truly understand climate change because they see it manifesting, for example. I remember a big food company talking about moving their food processing plants north, as it kept getting hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. So just the idea that fantastic, technological infrastructure and information systems can kind of combine and help us think about how to manage spaceship Earth a little bit more, realistically, credibly, and effectively is something that fills me with great excitement.
Now, I can't resist but to riff off Spaceship Earth and introduce our musical artist for this week. So sorry about this pun, but Gaia is the name of the musical artist this week, which of course is a play, although it's spelt differently, Gaeya, on the brilliant idea developed by James Lovelock in the 60s and 70s that the Earth is a self-regulating system. I don't know if I've shared with either of you, my very first job ever when I was about 21 was driving for the Hay Festival. And I used to go and pick up the authors and drive them to Hay. And so one of the fundamental pillars of my education was picking James Lovelock up in Cornwall and driving him 7 hours to Hay and spending 7 hours talking to him. Yeah, about the self-regulating ecosystem that was the planet and how he came up with the idea that really set the course of my life. I also picked up Goldie Hawn, who I picked up in Bristol Airport, and she came out of the airport and immediately stepped into the Mercedes that was parked behind my very small car. And I had to go to her and say, Miss Hawn, it's not this car. She goes, you're kidding me, right? And had to get out and get into the small car. Anyway, back to the point.
There's a beep. But look, isn't that interesting that James Lovelock got you to spend the rest of your life working on climate change?
Yeah, in 7 hours in a car. Yeah.
No, but to be honest, the discovery, it's a lovely story about where he got the theory of Gaia theory from. Is he was employed by NASA to look for life on Mars, and he noticed all the chemical reactions had stopped, and he looked around on Earth and he saw the unbelievable richness of the chemical reactions constantly going on, and he realized that was the biological, the replicating organisms, life on Earth that was causing it. Thank you.
Do you know, he talked about that actually during our 7-hour car ride, and I've always remembered this, where he said that the insights arrive when you stop trying to think directly about them. And it's when you step back and you have spaciousness in your mind that the real jumps occur, which I think is an amazing perspective actually for all of us. Anyway, the other thing that James Lovelock did is he presumably inspired this musical artist to name her musical name Gaia, and this song is called Contact. This song, according to the musician, not only focuses on our relationship with nature, but also a call that we need each other. She wanted this single to call out for unity rather than the separation caused by fear. Thinking that we have to fear one another, we lose the foresight of triumph via togetherness. She says we are not alone. Fear drives away our creativity, the love and compassion. We need each other, and we more than ever need to show one another that we are here to support the people around us. She also says that the role of the artist during the climate emergency is that it is not only the climate, but rather the environment all over we should be focused on. She believes that all artists and creatives should use their voice to enlighten people with new ideas that can support a sustainable future. Everything that is happening on this planet is in one way or another connected to each other. And therefore the focus does not have to be on the climate or even on the environment, but also on the social structure, to question the failing systems, or even to question the mental training that we receive as human beings. In the end, if we start healing ourselves, we will start to automatically heal the planet. This is Gaia with Contact. Thanks for being here.
Bye.
Bye.
Contact calling, higher states of innovation closely made for deeper missions in our hearts. Connecting the dots, decisions made for love to bond too deep in the faith. The recognition never to fade, never to fade. Spending time to reach out, crossing times that's left behind or be denied. Reaching out to feel life, reaching out to cross all the time. We all will find. Calling contact, coming in and out, skin on skin, root to the ground. Calling contact, coming in and out, skin on skin, root to the ground. Contact calling, hyperspace to innovation, tracing out vital dimensions, parallel worlds, and opening minds. Span away in a second, the stars aligning now, connecting body and soul, to touch, to feel, to touch, to thrive. Spending time to reach out, crossing times that's left behind will be denied. Reaching out to feel life, reaching out to cross all the time. We all will find. Calling contact, coming in and out, skin on skin, root to the ground. Calling contact, coming in and out, skin on skin, root to the ground. Felt you from before I knew you. Through the wall I sensed you coming. I knew even before you were calling. In this sense of full distraction, building up the interaction, I see we're all seeds of creation. Calling contact, coming in and down, skin on skin, root to the ground. Calling contact, coming in and down, skin on skin, root to the ground. Oh, calling contact, coming in and down, skin on skin, root to the ground. Calling contact, coming in and down, skin on skin, root to the ground.
So there you go, another episode of Outrage and Optimism. The track you just heard was Contact by Gaia with Anders Rain on piano. So Gaia filmed the live performance of this song at Vintage Loft Studio, so you can go watch it. You know what's cool is we ask for a performance, an audio performance, and in this case we get an audio performance and this incredible, amazing live performance, you know, filmed, perfectly mixed. It's just like, you know, it's great. It's amazing. They filmed it in CinemaScope, which is, you know, sounds just as cool as it looks, and it looks like a movie. The video is currently unlisted on YouTube, so in order to watch it, you have to click the link in the show notes of this episode to see it, which, you know, the show notes, they're important. There's cool stuff in there every week. Links to check out the music video, to check out Gaia, to buy and stream the music in the show notes. All right, on to the credits. Outrage and Optimism is a global optimism production, executive produced by Marina Mancilia Herman and produced by me, Clay Carnell. I missed our team meeting today, and I'm very sorry. Apologies to Sarah Law, Katie Bradford, Laura Richardson, Sophie McDonald, Freya Newman, Sarah Thomas, Sharon Johnson, and John Ward. And our hosts, the Paul Dickinson, Tom Rivett-Carnac, and Cristiana Figueres. Special thanks this week to Boygiante Gomez-Badillo, Alexandra Gee, Dan Thomas, Sean Cruz, Molly Donahue, Samuel Katzen, and Abin Abraham. And of course, our special guest this week, Sanda Ojiambo. For LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, we're at Global Optimism. If you need some optimism in your feed, we got you. That's my new thing. I keep saying we got you. I think it might be my new phrase for the winter. If you're enjoying the podcast, we are so happy about that. Please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, write us a review, and you know, we've been getting some really phenomenal reviews from teachers and just fans of the podcast, and you know, we'd love to read yours. So submit yours, and thank you. As we said at the beginning, Tom and Christiana's book, The Future We Choose, I actually have it in my hand here, real pages. It's up for a Goodreads Choice Award, which is amazing. Go to goodreads.com/choice awards, click on the science and technology category, and vote for The Future We Choose. Thank you. Okay, done. That is episode 79. For episode 80, next week, we have The Future of Fuels. It's our second episode in our investigative look into the future of transport. We have some phenomenal guests next week. I'm going to list off a couple of them here. I have them written down. The CEO of Daimler, Martin Dahm, Alejandro Agag, the founder of Formula E Racing, which is like Formula One racing, but electric. Monica Araya, the transport lead for the Climate Champions. And Craig Knight, CEO of Hyzon Motors, this really cool startup that's doing zero emissions hydrogen fuel cell powered commercial vehicles. So next week, you won't want to miss it. Hit subscribe. We'll see you then.